So this was the greatest year in PlayStation 5 history, right? A lot of major releases have come out, stuff like Final Fantasy 16, stuff like Diablo 4, Baldur's Gate 3. I think what's coming out in October, Spider-Man 2 is on the horizon, right? This is the biggest year for PS5 ever, right? This is the equivalent of like the PS4's 2015, where we got like Arkham Knight and Witcher 3 and Bloodborne, right? People were like starting to say the PS5 was a good console, and then it fell off the map by 2017, right? That's basically what happened with the PS4. And the same thing is going to happen to the PS5, right? This is the absolute high point for the console. Like nothing else is going to come out after this. There's no time to develop the big AAA games that people are looking forward to, right? You know, the exclusive titles, and PS5 is just going to get demolished by the Nintendo Switch, just like it is right now, right? This is the absolute height of the PS5's popularity, and it is getting absolutely stomped by Nintendo Switch, right? It is embarrassing how something like Tears of the Kingdom can just stomp every single game that comes out. You know, Baldur's Gate 3, Diablo 4, Final Fantasy 16, like essentially all of these games went up against Tears of the Kingdom and failed. And that kind of goes into what I've been saying for a long time, and something that I've come to realize that the vast majority of the gaming community are in denial about, is that Nintendo is indeed the market leader, right? This has been something I've been talking about for a long time. I've talked about how like Nintendo's handheld divisions have always been downplayed, and people have tried pretending that games on Game Boys and DS game like are somehow not relevant, right? We've seen these people like downplay 2D Mario and WarioWare and 3D Zelda, anything remotely Japanese. Like we've seen people come after like Nintendo games, right? A lot of major releases, like with no real regard for how well these games actually sell or how popular they are or how well they're received. Like if it's not like a AAA open world Western RPG, it's somehow not competitive. Like, never mind the fact that like Nintendo has been able to like keep budgets comparatively low compared to the competition while maintaining like very short dev turnaround times, while like respecting their developers, while packing the schedule full with like high quality releases across a whole wide range of genres, right? Like never mind all of that, they don't have Starfield, so they're not competitive in the eyes of the community, right? PlayStation is the market leader because it just is, okay. Never mind that like the games aren't as critically received, they don't sell as well, that they aren't remembered like 5 years later. Like how many people do you see today going back and playing Uncharted 2 or even the original Last of Us and saying to themselves, "Wow, this is the greatest thing ever made. Look at these cinematics, look at these visuals, look at this storytelling." No, because those games were replaced a long time ago, and nobody wants to admit it, right? Like nobody wants to admit that like Last of Us, Uncharted, Crash Bandicoot, like a lot of these landmark PlayStation titles were in no way notable or memorable, right? Like there was nothing special about any of them compared to like the Nintendo games that came out around the same time, right? Like it's crazy how kids today will still play Donkey Kong Country, but even 20 years ago, Crash Bandicoot felt like a relic of like the ancient past, right? Like Crash was trash even then. Like it's one of those things, right? Where the bias against Nintendo is so strong that people don't want to admit that there is a bias, right? Nintendo is objectively doing the best out of any gaming company in the world right now, with like the popularity of the Switch hardware, with its longevity, with its titles. But all you ever hear from these YouTubers, from these analysts, is how they're on the way out, how they are doomed, right? We are in the middle of Nintendo being a Nintendo is about to outsell the best-selling console ever made. Well, the best-selling console ever made, the PS2, right? Never mind that the PS2, like, those numbers were fake and like it didn't sell nearly as much as Sony reported it did. But like, the officially stated numbers that Sony released to the public, right? Those insane numbers that were by design meant to never be broken are about to be about to be replaced by Nintendo Switch, right? Like no longer can people point to the PS2 and use that as an example of like the golden age of gaming where third parties could do whatever they want and Nintendo was on the way out and Sony reigned supreme, right? Like no longer can we do that because the Switch is easily a far better platform. It's far better received. It has way better games. Like, why exactly are we still doing this thing where every single person in the sphere is trying to say that Nintendo isn't competitive? Right? Like, not only are they competitive, they are the market leader. I don't understand how someone could look at Tears of the Kingdom and not think that this is something that's like cutting edge, that this is something like way above the rest of the way above the competition. Like nobody wants to admit it. Like we are in this weird situation where people want to keep pretending as if it's 1995 and that Sony can just outspend Nintendo on marketing, on hardware, on like software exclusivity deals when that hasn't been the case in like 20 years, really. Like it's been like a slow, steady decline to get to this point, but PlayStation isn't able to do what they did in the 90s, right? Like I've been saying this like 10 years ago, right? They are just losing their influence. They are losing their like complete control over the sphere. And companies that are like, you know, joined at the hip with Sony, you know, one's like Square Enix, one's like Capcom, one's like Falcom, right? They're all falling apart at the seams because they have been so reliant on like the Sony monolith that like they never really built up an audience on Nintendo hardware. And as a result of that, they have no idea what like the actual gaming community wants, right? They have no idea what actual gamers enjoy and what they respond to. Because of course, like Capcom has put out good games in the past 20 years. Of course, Square Enix has as well. But like they are so few and far between that they might as well be inconsequential, right? And the fact that they keep doing the pulling these stunts that are clearly meant to appeal to like the Sony shareholders and the Sony control and like the Sony audience and like the you know the ESG, like the fact that they're doing stuff like that really showcases just how rooted the problem is in Japanese society, right? How rooted the problem is in Japanese game development studios because you keep seeing them do this. You keep seeing them like pull ridiculous stunts, right? You know, like even earlier in the gen, right? When Switch first came out, you had plenty of developers like Falcom or like the Danganronpa guy like coming out and like constantly trashing the Switch, constantly trying to say that it wasn't a big deal, that it wasn't successful, that they would continue to develop exclusively for PlayStation hardware, right? You had a lot of people coming out and doing that, right? You know, the Danganronpa guy, Kadakawa, like he straight up came out and tried to say that he didn't know what a Switch was, right? Like that's how bad it was. That's how bad these developers were pushing to try and get people, trying to steer them towards the PlayStation hardware, trying to keep up the illusion that PlayStation is the market leader. But like as we all know, like the market rejected that. Right, we're seeing more and more that these games simply PlayStation is just not a viable platform for for these titles anymore, right? It doesn't matter how much Sony gives you, how many perks or like what insane royalty cuts or like how much they promote your games if like nobody actually buys it. And that's been like the problem for a very, very, very long time is that like increasingly these people are seeing diminishing returns to the point where they have to rely very much on PC releases and the occasional Nintendo Switch release in order to keep themselves relevant and in order to like keep up the illusion and in order to like try to bring back the old days, trying to keep up the narrative that Nintendo isn't relevant and that Sony is going to like someday make a glorious return to form, which I think it's safe to say at this point is never, ever going to happen. Nintendo is the market leader and it is going to stay like that for a very, very long time.